Hello and welcome to Unbossed, Unbothered, and Unfiltered. I'm your host, Lauren Zayu. Join me as we navigate the political communications, ups and downs, and ins and outs of our day. We're talking to leading experts on the issues that help our country move forward for the better. My guests and I promise to give you the history, the real, and the ideal. Let's dive in. Hello, and welcome to Unbossed, Unbothered, and Unfiltered. I'm your host, Lauren Zayu. This episode means so much to me because it's bringing together elements of my life that are fundamental. It feels very full circle, and I'm excited about that. In 2007, when I was in high school, I started volunteering with the Planned Parenthood North Texas and with an organization called TACT, that's Teenage Communication Theater. We were peer educators and advocates on sex education, birth control, healthy relationships, drinking, drugs, and so many other issues that teenagers deal with. That group ended up being my entry point into political advocacy and education, and I'm excited to be able to engage with them on this side of things, even though it is under unfortunate circumstances. Governor Greg Abbott signed Senate Bill 8 into law, making abortion in Texas illegal after a fetal heart tone can be heard, which is right around 6 weeks. This is an extreme anti-choice piece of legislation and currently under review by the Supreme Court, but is nonetheless law of the land in Texas. I'm here with Kelly Hart from Planned Parenthood of Greater Texas to talk about what this law looks like in practice and who's most impacted. Kelly Hart is the Senior Director of Public Affairs for Planned Parenthood of Greater Texas, or PPGT. Their public affairs department advocates for every person's right to comprehensive, confidential reproductive health care and works in cooperation with allies to maintain and increase access to these services. Kelly has a bachelor's degree in government from the University of Texas in Austin and a graduate degree in public health from the Johns Hopkins School of Public Health. She has been with Planned Parenthood for more than 20 years and is responsible for directing the agency's community engagement, advocacy, and volunteer programs. Additionally, she works with the local community board as well as the agency's clergy advisory council. I'm excited to welcome to Unbossed, Unbothered, and Unfiltered, Kelly Hart. Hi, Kelly.
Hi, Lauren. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for being here. We just want to kind of start with letting the listeners know a bit about you and your background.
Well, I am based, I work for Planned Parenthood of Greater Texas, an affiliate of Planned Parenthood Federation of America. We are based in Dallas, Texas. I work out of the Dallas office. I have been with Planned Parenthood in one form or another for more than 20 years now. I actually started as a family planning assistant, which meant that I was one of the people that you would see when you came to our health center. I would check you in, I would take your blood pressure, talk to you about what the clinician was going to talk to you about, or help make sure you understood some of the basics. And so I did that for about 6 months, which I really love because that's just a great way to really understand the bread and butter of what Planned Parenthood does, which is the provision of healthcare. Mm-hmm. And then I moved to the administrative office and actually helped to start the public affairs department in my particular affiliate, and have now watched it grown. And here now to talk to you about where we are with Senate Bill 8 and probably some of the journey that got us here as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, you've got a wealth of experience with more than 20 years with Planned Parenthood, as you said. And so I wanted to start with a bit of the background. I know that Texas has a reputation for being anti-choice. And so often people can write off moments like this as being standard protocol. But if you would kind of talk to us about how we got here, as you said.
Well, so how we got here, when I started, my first legislative session was 2001, but actually the first real piece of anti-abortion, anti-choice legislation was passed in 1999. It was a Notification Act. It was a requirement that if a minor wanted to have an abortion, they'd have to notify a parent or have the judicial bypass option. And so every year, every legislative session, Texas only meets every other year. Every legislative session since then, it's just been adding on and adding on and adding on. And so we are now where it is illegal to have an abortion in Texas after the fetal heart tone has been heard. But in addition to that, we've already have a 24-hour waiting period. We have mandatory things, not all of which are medically or scientifically accurate, that our doctors are required to tell patients before they have the procedure. There's the required sonogram, and many others. I mean, just too numerous to list in just an hour's time. But basically, just a lot of laws that, if you hear them just by themselves, a 24-hour waiting period, don't really sound so terrible. But what's happened is that each individual layer gets added on, and without any thought for how it does or doesn't interact with all the other laws that have already been passed. And so we're now in the situation where I'm hearing anecdotally from my staff from my colleagues who work in the health centers, that, we'll have patients who will come in for the required sonogram. There will be no fetal heart tone. We will schedule them to have an abortion the next day. They come in the next day and, oh, now there's a fetal heart tone. I'm sorry, we're going to have to do what we can do to help get you to another state where you can legally have your constitutionally protected procedure, because you can't get it in Texas right now. And I think that you can imagine how devastatingly heartbreaking that is for the patient, who has to now rearrange their life.
Right.
Probably they have children, a child or children. 60% of people in Texas who want an abortion already have at least one child. They have to think about work. Do my colleagues at work know why I want time off? Do I want them to know? I mean, all of the things. And then it's also devastating for our staff. I mean, we signed on to do this work because we want to provide the health care that our patients need. And through this absolutely inhumane and cruel law, they are being denied the ability to provide the caring and the clinical health care that the patients want and that they signed on to do. So it's been just unimaginably heartbreaking and devastating since this law went into effect on September 1.
September 1st. That's what I was going to ask. Okay. So keeping that in mind, though, with Planned Parenthood being a major healthcare provider, I know abortion is often what they're targeted for, but they do a great deal of other services, right?
Yes, we do.
We want to talk about the breast cancer screenings, the STIs, all of that.
Yes, I mean, gender-affirming hormone care is available. Gender-affirming hormone therapy is available at several of our sites. I think not everybody knows that, we provide, annual exams, the clinical breast exam, the pap smear, and the pelvic exam. We also do follow-ups for abnormal pap smears. And the pap smears, just for listeners who may not know, are when we check cervical cells for signs of precancerous or cancerous cervical cells. When the pap smear comes back with abnormalities, we also provide colposcopy, a diagnostic tool to see what's going on with abnormal cervical cells. And we also have the ability to remove precancerous cervical cells. So in that way, Planned Parenthood is actually helping to prevent cervical cancer. And then, we do the clinical breast exam. If the clinician finds something, a lump or something that doesn't feel right, then as, other doctors do, we will refer for a mammogram for our patients. So, we're providing these preventive services. We're providing them for people no matter how they identify as far as their gender. Our number one service right now is testing and treatment for sexually transmitted infections. And after that, it's the annual exam, and then the provision of birth control. And we make provision for all FDA-approved methods, including a same-day visit for insertion of an IUD, which not all clinicians have the skill or ability to provide.
That is significant. I mean, I have an IUD, and the wait time between when I scheduled it and when I received it, I believe might have been a few weeks. So same day is a huge benefit. And as we transition into Hold Up, I wanted to take a moment to kind of talk about the fetal heart tone that you referred to, that people have to adhere to in an effort to not receive the care that they've asked for. And how far are most women along when they even find out that they're pregnant, and at what point does a fetal heart tone register?
Well, the fetal heart tone registers around the 6-week mark, which is why this is also casually referred to as a 6-week abortion ban, right? But of course, it's different for every individual, as every pregnancy is different for every individual. And then as far as when a person knows they're pregnant, I mean, it's the same thing. I mean, if you have a regular cycle, you may be able to pinpoint the minute that it's different. If you're hoping to be pregnant and you've been trying, then perhaps you'll notice it earlier. But if your cycle's irregular, if you're stressed, if you have a lot of things going in your life, going on in your life, well, it could be later.
Yeah.
Right. And so again, we are immediately closing off options for individuals in a way that, in addition to being unconstitutional based on 50 years of Supreme Court precedent, is just not medically necessary or humane, in my opinion.
Absolutely. And you mentioned that it appears that the option your staff has at this point is to send patients elsewhere in order to receive treatment. And so I imagine that's at the cost of the patient.
Oh, no. We're very pleased. We've really extended our campaign, and donors here in Texas and throughout the U.S. have been amazing. We have hired staff in our contact center to be navigators. And so our goal is to help an individual. I mean, we have information on what the laws in the other states are, who the providers in the other states, how to contact. We're in contact with other providers. So a lot of Texans are directly making calls for appointments in other states, and then we're being connected to help them pay for the procedure, to help them pay for travel, to help them pay for hotel rooms overnight. No, and we are not alone. I want to say there are other practical support organizations, the abortion funds in Texas, they're doing the same thing. We're all doing our best to make sure that individuals who need the help get the help. But I also want to make sure that your listeners understand, again, as we were talking about earlier, for many people who want an abortion, money is only part of the problem, right? I mean, we could, bring a golden coach to their house to magically whisk them away, but they still need a babysitter. They still need the permission to not be at work. They still could miss the money that they would get from not working those hours, right? I mean, so I think we all of us need to realize that, I mean, we're talking about catastrophe, and maybe it's not a catastrophe for us personally, but for that individual that's doing what they can to keep their life on track, it's a catastrophe. Right. And it's one that could absolutely be avoided. And I want to say that too, because we know now through research, the primary numbers of unintended pregnancies in the United States are among low income and uninsured individuals.
Right.
And particularly in Texas, our legislature year after year has opted not to expand the ACA health insurance coverage to those who fall into what we call the Medicaid gap. To qualify for Medicaid health care in Texas, wow. I mean, you have to be practically just living out of your car. I mean, there's not a lot of social safety net options for low-income uninsured Texans in the first place. And now we're just placing just this extra thing on people to make their lives just that much harder when we don't need to be.
Absolutely. And I think that the last bit of what you said about it just makes your life significantly harder. And it truly is a catastrophe in the event that this cannot be rendered in the way that it needs to be.
Right.
Keeping that in mind, though, I think that you and I had spoken earlier about the fact that this has been like a layered impact. And this kicked in September 1st. But did this particular law impact any of the other laws that were already on the books that made it difficult?
Well, it's just another bit of the layer. I mean, none of the other laws have been repealed, right? So young minors still have to get. They not only have to notify a parent, but an additional law was added. They now have to get consent from a parent. And if and again, and you would want to talk to somebody from Jane's Due Process, which is an organization that helps young people in Texas get the judicial bypass. Judges are not suddenly ramping up their court dockets to get minors in within this very tiny, narrow window. So for a minor who doesn't have the ability to tell a parent, I mean, and sometimes it's because they don't know where their parents are, right? I mean, we like to imagine that every child is in a loving two-parent family home. Well, we know that's not true. And there's no provision for getting permission from your aunt, who could be your actual caretaker, right? Or your grandma or whatever. And so if you don't know where your actual birth mother or your actual birth father is located, or your actual legal guardian, which all that entails, then there's no way for you even to get the permission to have the procedure, and you're forced to go to court. So just callous uncaring about the realities of what these other laws have done and the realities of people's lives and what this is doing to them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that it really does, allow for how would I phrase this? A lot of the people who put these laws into practice will never have to utilize them and will never have to seek out services. And I know that there was a lot of conversation or pushback in Texas in particular around the voting rights, and Democrats are doing a lot of work on that. And I know that that's very important and that has to happen too. But has there been any judicial or court intervention for this law in particular?
Yes. And I'm going to start by saying I am not a lawyer. I have a graduate degree in public health and an undergraduate degree in government. I don't have a law degree. So currently there are a number of lawsuits. Primarily there's the Department of Justice that the Biden administration has initiated. Before the law went into effect, there was a law here in Texas in federal court, a state district federal court, that was like, I want to say, if not all, most of the providers, the abortion funds and the practical support organizations, a couple of clergy members, and maybe I'm missing a couple, but basically we all joined together to say, we didn't need this. Because the other part of the law we haven't gotten into, and I'll just take a minute, another way in which Senate Bill 8 is uniquely horrific is that the legislators decided that for this particular piece of legislation, the state, those who passed the law, would not be in charge of enforcing the law, right? Mm-hmm. So, in other states, when, similar bans have been passed, the state sues, the director of the health department or the attorney general or the governor or somebody. And it gets put on hold because it's blatantly unconstitutional. Senate Bill 8 was designed so that the enforcers of the law are basically anyone in the United States. So it allows anyone, not just anyone in Texas, but anyone in the United States, to sue anyone who they believe has violated the law. And that does not just mean abortion providers or those who assist the abortion providers. It also means everyone who aids or abets. That's the actual language. So if your sister gives you money to help you pay for your procedure, she could be sued. If somebody offers to drive you to the clinic to get the procedure, they too could be sued, post when you're legally allowed to have it, right?
Right.
And so, again, this has made it, so now we're in court. We went to state court, or we filed together to say, we had to figure out, who do we even sue, right? Because we can't sue everybody in the United States. So that's been part of the legal drama. And I'm kind of mixing up the answer, but it's just so, this is why it even got put into, the court, we started before the September 1 implementation date, and we went through the court process, which we just don't need to get into, and I only understand. But we got to the Supreme Court, right? I get this part. We got to the Supreme Court and we said, we need emergency relief. We need you to put a stop to this law while we go back to the courts and untangle this unique knot that the legislature's given us. And the Supreme Court waited a day or so and then said, nah, this is really complicated. And well, we're just going to let the law go into effect while we work this out in court. And that's why we are where we are, while we're wrangling in the courts. And then there's also several state level court cases that are going on as well.
Sure.
So basically the answer to your question is yes, we're all over this in all the ways that we can think of legally, but because of the unique way the enforcement mechanism has been put into place, some courts are like, this is the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. This was one district court hearing the Department of Justice lawsuit had. And other courts are like, oh my God, this is so complicated. We don't know what to do. We're just going to let everybody be screwed,
right?
While we slowly wend our way through. So we're fighting in the courts. We're actually Two of the court cases, the Department of Justice case and everybody's case all molded together, had actually oral arguments before the Supreme Court last week. And we are waiting again. We have been waiting again for the Supreme Court to make some kind of decision as to, what's going on. All we know, the practical part of all of this is that even while we're doing all these court cases, people in Texas who find themselves with an unintended pregnancy are still suffering.
Yeah.
Wow, that was a long answer. So I hope.
No, I mean, those are the answers we like. You were very thorough, very comprehensive. I appreciate that. I feel like I got a good understanding of what happened. And I do think that, there's, with the Supreme Court, essentially through the entire previous administration, there was this fear that they were going to overturn Roe, that was like something that was major and going to happen. And it appears that while they have not necessarily done it directly, there has been a great deal of, I guess, obfuscating of responsibilities in allowing laws like this to go into effect.
Yeah, foot dragging is the term that comes to my mind. Really? You couldn't just say, let's put a pause on everything? That's what injunctions are for, or temporary restraining orders, right? Just say, whoa, let's just let things go on while we figure this out. But no, that hasn't happened yet. So yes, it's and also I know we're not talking about this particular subject right now, but the Supreme Court is poised to hear oral arguments December 1 in a Mississippi case that bans abortion at 15 weeks.
Okay.
And it's kind of, for your listeners and for people paying attention, it's going to get very confusing because lots of different court cases. But basically, the constitutional right to have an abortion in the United States is at jeopardy in a way that it has not been in 50 years. And all of us who care about sexual and reproductive health care, reproductive justice, bodily autonomy need to be very concerned what's going on in the Supreme Court right now.
That is good to know, because I was going to ask you what is at stake, and that sounds like what it is.
Yes. I mean, very basic things for a lot of us. And of course, we know that the same way that, Griswold versus Connecticut was like a privacy case that first allowed people to actually access birth control. I don't know how many people realize that there was a Supreme Court case around married couples' use of birth control, but that was also used as precedent, for example, to allow for more rights for LGBTQ individuals.
Okay.
And again, I'm not a lawyer, but I just kind of want to point out that it starts with abortion or whatever, but it doesn't ever stay just affecting, right?
Absolutely. And as we transition into I Ain't Sorry, I wanted to ask you, you have been doing this work for so long in a place that is hard to do it, right? So I have my own experience with Planned Parenthood North Texas that I hope to tell the listeners about in the introduction and things. Again, that was when it was Planned Parenthood North Texas. Now y'all are Planned Parenthood Greater Texas. But such an important organization that's doing fantastic work and is often not given its due. Just a brief moment is I volunteered with Planned Parenthood for North Texas with an organization called TACT, Teenage Communication Theater, for 3 years when I was in high school. And I came to Planned Parenthood probably at a minimum once a week during the school year, 3 times a week during the summers. And we received education. So for people who are not familiar with Texas, Texas has abstinence-only sex education, which means that in schools we're not taught comprehensively about sex education as far as STIs or even reproductive health. And so a way that Planned Parenthood was attempting to combat that was giving us information as peer educators to go into the schools and teach our peers. But I say all of that to say that in my time going to Planned Parenthood to essentially take sex education courses, there were protesters outside every single time that I went. And I was called all types of names. I was prayed over. I was, told that God would, cast my soul into all types of places. And I was like, I'm just here, I'm not necessarily here in any type of emotionally vulnerable state, right? But for my peers who were pregnant, for people who were attempting to use other services, for people who were already there, not as option A even. It was a really, really harrowing experience. And so what I wanted to ask you, right, is like, what got you into this work, one, and what keeps you in this work?
Oh, wow. I have to think back. No, I know exactly what got me into this work. Because when I was, an undergraduate back in the day, um, I was, well, at the time, you know, women's liberation, right, was still kind of new. There'd been a lot of gains in, the 70s and the early 80s, but it was still not like real in the way that it is more real today. And I was pondering like, okay, I want to do something to help that, right? Like I'm a woman and I want to do well. I want my fellow women to do well, right? And I was like, well, having an unintended pregnancy seems like something that can really trip people up. Because I wanted to find like, well, what's sort of like a foundational way to help? There's all different ways, right, that somebody could come into that. But this was the way that I chose.
Okay.
And the time, yes, it was about abortion access, but it was also about like all the other things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like knowing about birth control and how to use it and where to get it and being able to afford it. And so that began my journey. And of course, it's just grown and multiplied so much. And what's kept me is, I think part of it is still the same thing, but also the growing, because what I've really come to realize is that it's part of it, yes, is access to sexual and reproductive health care. But here in Texas, there is a dearth of access to health care at all.
Yeah.
And I think being at getting my public health degree from Johns Hopkins, I think that really set me on that journey of like, it's larger than just one kind of health. It's all of public health. And how does public health enable individuals? It helps, women perhaps avoid an unintended pregnancy and not have that challenge. But being healthy is good for everyone. Right. And so if we want it, to me, it is like one way to help build the better version of America that I know you and I strive for, right? And others who agree with us in these things.
Absolutely. And I guess on the tail end of that, in the work that you do, what is giving you hope?
What is giving me hope? I've been pondering that, especially since you sent me the document. I think what's giving me hope, number one, that abortion is more visible than ever. There's other things, and I hope we get a chance to talk about it. But, when I started, people barely even used the word abortion, right? And if they did, it was like in softer tones, So I think seeing that there's a lot more organizations that are not strictly sexual and reproductive health organizations that are willing to partner with us, this greater understanding amongst all of the organizations that are doing some kind of social justice or social benefit work, that we have to kind of figure out more how to work together, because we're all of us at the end trying to solve the same problems, right? We're trying to make people's lives better.
Right.
And every little thing we can do, helps make that the case. So that makes me feel hopeful. The numbers of young people that are more vocal about what they want for the future makes me hopeful. The larger numbers of organizations here in Texas that are working for social and reproductive health care rights, healthcare access, and justice makes me feel. When I first started, it was Planned Parenthood and AROL, man, that was it.
Yeah.
So seeing all these other organizations, seeing young people, seeing it be more mainstream, that's what gives me hope.
Absolutely. And to your first point, especially acknowledging how comprehensive the issue is, like all of these problems touch each other, right? It's not a situation where anything happens in a silo. And I was working a campaign a few years ago, and me and the campaign manager were sort of talking through our pro-choice language, like what we were going to use and say for the candidate. And she said, well, ultimately, like as a woman, you cannot be stable economically in the event you don't have bodily autonomy. You just can't. And so like abortion is an economic issue. And I had never heard it framed like that before. And it is, right? Like this idea that pregnancy for people who carry children is a situation where it requires time off work and doctor's appointments and prenatal care. And this is all before birth, right? After birth also requires a great deal of care. And then we also know how our country tends to feel about children and childcare, even when they appear to force people to have children. There's still not a lot of room in the workplace in order to provide for them, take care of them. I at the age now where my friends have kids, and the amount of income that is taken up by childcare is egregious.
Yeah.
Like, in the event you don't have a parent that can take off or some particular help, it can be 25-30% of what you're dealing with. And so I'm grateful to see the expansive conversation that's being had around abortion. I am grateful for Planned Parenthood, especially. That was my jumpstart for advocacy. As I told you, they brought me to DC when I was maybe 16 years old to lobby our representatives for healthcare, because I think then the ACA was still up for debate, and comprehensive sex education. And unfortunately, being from Mesquite and Dallas, I think my representative was Jeb Henserling, so there wasn't a great deal of conversation to be had. He wouldn't. But I appreciated the experience, and it showed me what it looked like to advocate for yourself and your community. And I mean, I've effectively made a career of that at this point.
Yeah.
But keeping that in, go ahead.
Well, I want to jump in because you talked about abortion as an economic issue. And I think another way that people don't think about it is abortion is a decision that many people make because it's best for their family. Remember, I said that, the majority of people who want an abortion have children. I mean, I think we also need to remember that too. I mean, it is a choice of caring for children that this person is already parenting. I just really want to throw that out there because I think we get this idea in our head, some 20-year-old single made a mistake. No, we're talking about married individuals with other child caring responsibilities. They look at what they've got on their plate and they say, I can't do this for another child, right? That is a decision out of love and family and caring.
Absolutely. It is a family decision. And I think that the broadening of the conversation around reproductive care is important. The expansive, even our language around the gender with it. It is not a women's issue. It is not even a single person issue, right? Like families are making these decisions for what's best for them collectively. And so it has been a complete, I think it's led to more understanding of what it is, which I also think is helpful. Yeah. And it's just not, I do agree that there is hope to be had for the future of it overall with the progress that's been made thus far. Yeah. And as we transition into our final kind of thoughts, if you want to offer any closing ideas that we didn't get a chance to go over or any additional information, that's always welcome.
Yeah, well, one of the things that I kind of wanted to get into too, and this is another thing that really frustrates me in Texas, and I don't remember the exact lead in, but basically the other part of the story I've been telling people when I talk about this for a long time is that people's attention is caught when anti-abortion laws are passed. But in the state of Texas, particularly in the last 10 years, there has been an all-out effort on the state's family planning program, right? I mean, we talk a lot about helping people to be like, we want people to be responsible, right? Oh, but they need to be responsible. Well, here in Texas, in addition to not having proper requirements for sexual health education in school, like you discussed and experienced, they have managed to decimate the funding for family planning, kick Planned Parenthood out of the state's family planning program, and a successful federal-state partnership for expanding sexual access to reproductive or family planning health care. They've also kicked Planned Parenthood out of partnerships to be part of the breast and cervical cancer screening program, the HIV prevention program. I'm sure I've forgotten another ones, but basically the upshot is at the same time that they are taking away these options for people for whom abortion is the best of, their options, they are not teaching young people about sexual health or birth control in high school. They are not making it available for low-income and uninsured individuals, especially, even while they don't do anything to expand access to health care insurance in the state. And so what are you left with, right? I mean, you're doing the best you can. And then also, because they have refused to expand Medicaid through the Affordable Care Act in Texas, it's putting a real strain on hospitals in rural counties, many of which are closing.
Mm-hmm.
Which, I mean, so I have to wonder about the individual who doesn't get access to, information, health care, the ability to have an abortion. And, oh, yeah, there's no prenatal care that they can afford in their county either, or a place to deliver their baby. I mean, let's just think about that, right? There's a lot of talk about family values. There's a lot of talk about caring about children. We have the highest maternal mortality rate in the state. And the recommendation was to expand healthcare insurance, healthcare coverage for women who've given birth from 12 weeks to a year. And all the legislature managed to do this past session was extended for 6 months. Right? I mean, there are no actions that actually would help people to have the outcome that the legislators say they want for everyone, right? Even if it was happy, healthy babies, they're not even helping to make that happen. That's the end of my rant.
That's a great place.
My colleagues have heard me say that a million times. It infuriates me. There is nothing that our elected officials have done in more than a decade that in any way help with the health, safety of families in this state who can't figure out how to do it on their own, right? Some people, all of us need a little help sometime.
Absolutely.
And families in Texas they're not getting it.
They're not. They aren't, and are also being shamed when they attempt to take actions for themselves as well.
Bingo. Yes. So anyway, that's my final thing. And did you want how to, if you're in Texas?
Absolutely. In the event, people want to reach out to you, what's the best way they do that?
Yeah, well, our website is ppgreatertx.org. So you can learn about us, all our services, how to make an appointment. If you happen to be in Texas and you'd like to make a healthcare appointment with us, or actually nationwide with Planned Parenthood, 1-800-230-PLAN, PLAN. That's a number to call, and we can set you up with healthcare services. And of course, social media, y'all can follow us, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, at ppgreatertx. So thank you so much, Lauren, for this opportunity.
Thank you for being here. This has been fantastic. It was informative. It was engaging. I'm really excited about it. If you'll give me one second to close. You just finished this episode of Unbossed, Unbothered, and Unfiltered. If you're looking for me, you can find me at Lauren Zayu on Twitter and Instagram. And if you're looking for the show, you can find us at Unbossed, Unbothered, and Unfiltered on Facebook and Instagram. I hope to see you there.